Thank you. Well, thanks so much for that warm welcome. The theme of this presentation today is to try to impart to you information that you could not just apply in your lives, but be able to articulate carefully to explain what superior nutrition, what are the main principles of the superior nutrition to your patients, your friends, your family. In other words, you know how they say put the oxygen mask on yourself first? Well, first you have to take care of your health. Live the life and protect yourself against the chronic diseases and premature death that afflicts other Americans. And then to be able to articulate what you did for your own life, to be able to help others around you that you care about or that you may reach in your career. So the underlying theme of this presentation is that nutritional science has made dramatic advances in the last 10 or 15 years. And we don't have to have heart attacks in America. We don't have to have strokes. We don't have to have people living in nursing homes after strokes with dementia. And we can win the war on cancer. So how many of you would like that to protect yourselves against what happens to other Americans, right? Not having heart attacks, not having strokes. What's that worth? Is that worth maybe $500,000, $1 million to not have a stroke or heart attack or not get demented or not get cancer? To add 20 years to your life? What? Probably millions, right? And by the way, I do accept personal credit cards, checks, cash, you know. But the point is, let's accept the fact that it's unnatural to develop heart attacks and diabetes and to become overweight and develop these chronic diseases. Naturally, if we lived in a manner that supplied the body with what it needs and met its biological needs to the best degree, we would live a long life completely with no events, with no chronic illnesses, with no high blood pressure, with no atherosclerotic buildup and resulting heart disease and high blood pressure. And we wouldn't get cancer either. So let's get started. So the end of dieting discusses that we don't have to go on a diet because eating properly keeps us at a most favorable weight for the rest of our life, and our weight doesn't go up and down. And if you're overweight, you rapidly gravitate to that normal weight within a period of a few months. You know, if you're very overweight, it could take longer, but the point is, you don't have to diet, you just have to eat right, and the body will fix itself naturally. Now, the standard American diet, the SAD, which I also call the DAD, the deadly American diet, results in about 40% of us dying of heart attacks and strokes and about 30% dying of cancer. So let's look at this diet that I say has been designed by Al-Qaeda. Americans eat about 54% of calories from processed and refined foods. Now, when you process the food, you remove the essential nutrients, the micronutrients that were there initially, the fibers and the antioxidants are gone. So those inherent protective factors that protect us against disease are no longer in the food, we're just getting the calories out of it. So they're called empty calories. Now, processed foods, as many of you know, are white bread and sugar and oil and donuts, cookies, crackers, rice cakes, breakfast bars, chips, breakfast cereals, soft drinks, you know, things that Americans are eating. That's half of what they eat. Just put empty calories in their diet. And the more empty calories you put in your body, in your life, the more you've accelerated your aging and set the groundwork for chronic disease. So we'll talk about some of the mechanisms via which these foods are not just empty, but they actually have positive effects on promoting cancers. In other words, they're pro-carcinogens when you eat foods without the antioxidants and fibers that nature put in real food. So that's half of what Americans eat. And don't forget, these foods are very, very low in nutrients. They're just a source of calories. And then Americans eat about 30% of calories from animal products. Now, animal products don't have phytochemicals and antioxidants either. They're calorically dense. They're a rich source of calories like the refined foods are. And they're relatively low in micronutrients and fiber as well. So they're calorically rich, but they don't contain those phytochemicals and antioxidants that protect us against cancer. So if we're not getting it with the processed foods, and we're not getting it with the animal products, well, the question is, how much natural produce are Americans consuming? And you can see what's left on the pie. And even though it says Americans consume about 11% of calories from produce, half of that is white potato and ketchup products. So we're talking about 5% of calories in the American diet is from colorful plant produce, where all the money's at, where all the phytochemicals and antioxidants are, is a very small percent. And that's not enough to fuel the needs of the human species. Scientists test it out. I mean, they follow spider monkeys and baboons and other primates around in the jungles with those telephoto lenses on those special cameras, and they watch everything they eat over a period of months, and they track it in their computers, and they add it up, and they find that the average animal per body weight in their natural environment are eating about 50 times as much of the antioxidants and phytochemicals that Americans consume. That even the RDI is dramatically, in other words, the recommended daily intake of the government is about 50 times lower than what these animals are consuming in the wild, and 90% of Americans don't meet the RDI. Did you follow that? So the standard American diet is particularly harmful. Let's go over some of these features now again. Now, I mentioned these terms just to clarify that there are two types of nutrients we get in food. One is the macronutrients, and the macronutrients are, the word macro means big, right? Macronutrients means big, and those nutrients, fat, carbohydrate, and protein, contain calories. And Americans are consuming much too much calories. We're consuming much too much fat. We have to eat less fat. Much too much protein, we have to eat less protein, and much too much carbohydrate, we have to eat less carbohydrate. We have to eat less of all three macronutrients. And water is also a macronutrient, by the way, something we need in large amounts, but I'm not talking about that now because it doesn't contain calories. We're talking about the caloric-containing macronutrients, fat, carbohydrate, and protein, and how any one of those three in excess damages our body and ages us. And that micronutrients in particular, which do not contain calories, are needed in much greater amounts than Americans are consuming right now. In other words, Americans ubiquitously have subtle micronutrient deficiencies, especially for that broad array of nutrients called phytochemicals, which are so prevalent in natural foods. Like, for example, in the 1940s, we discovered most vitamins and minerals, and we thought we'd have this licked. We could just take a vitamin pill. Or we can add thiamine and riboflavin to Cocoa Puffs or vitamin C to Kool-Aid. But it didn't work. Cancer rates skyrocketed from the 1940s to the year 2000. And what accompanied that skyrocketing rate of cancer were dramatic increases in autoimmune diseases as well. What I'm saying here right now is that every strawberry has about 700 different nutrients in it, not just 36. Every piece of broccoli has about 1,000 different nutrients in them. And those phytochemicals are not optional. The human body needs these things for normal function of the immune system. Just to be normal, you need hundreds and hundreds of different phytochemicals from an assortment of natural plant foods. Did you got that? Leading to this first principle, this simple principle that I want you to, the first principle of a nutritarian diet, and the word nutritarian means a diet high in nutrients that the humans need for maximizing their health. The first principle is that your diet style needs to have an adequate nutrient density, nutrient per calorie density. That means your healthy life expectancy, how long you're going to live, is proportional to the micronutrient per calorie density of your diet. That means you look to eat a lot of foods that are rich in nutrients per calorie, you're going to add years to your life. And if you eat foods that are low in nutrients per calorie, you're going to take years away from your life. So give me an example, if you can, of some foods that you would think have a very high level of micronutrients per calorie. Can you give me some examples?
Apple.
Apple? Moderately. Greens, like green vegetables, very high, yes. Kale, right. So green vegetables do win the award. If the race was a 5-mile race, green vegetables would win the race by 4 miles. They pretty much are higher in nutrients per calorie of almost all of the foods, and Americans hardly eat any green vegetables at all. But in any case, they're an example of a food with a very high micronutrient density. And linked to longer life, by the way. People who eat more green vegetables, the more greens they eat, the longer they live. And there was a study done on 132,000 people, and the more greens they ate, with no leveling of effect, the more greens they ate, the longer people lived. Now, give me an example of some foods that you might be a very, very low nutrient density, mostly just calories with no significant micronutrient load.
Cheese.
Bread, cheese, and oil, those are good examples. Coca-Cola, very good. Oops, shouldn't say any commercial brands, sorry. But that's right, the colas or those soft drinks are very dramatically low in nutrients because they're just source of empty calories, just calories. But in any case, the first principle, you guys can articulate that principle? What's the first principle of good health or a nutritarian diet? And you just have to say nutrient density, right? Eating a diet with an adequate nutrient density.